Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Stories and Sleepy Souls. Well, today I have some scary black screen stories to help you fall asleep peacefully. I'm damn sure that before the end of these stories, you're gonna fall asleep. So, like this video and subscribe the channel. And did you like my stories? Did you like my voice? Tell me in the comments. So, are you ready? Turn the lights off, close your eyes and start listening me. The Night Watchman's Lantern. In the peaceful village of Willoughby, where the houses were painted with warm hues and the cobblestone streets echoed gentle footsteps, there stood a clock tower that was the heart of the town. The clock's hands ticked in harmony with the villagers' lives, marking the passage of time for farmers, bakers, and blacksmiths alike. Guarding this clock tower at night was an old security guard named Mr. Harrow. He had been the night watchman for so long that the townsfolk joked he'd been there since the tower's foundation was laid. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with streaks of amber and rose, Mr. Harrow began his rounds. His most trusted companion was a sturdy, oil-burning lantern with glass panes that cast a warm, golden light. The lantern had been a gift from his late wife, Margaret, who always told him, "Let this lantern be your guide, my love, when the night grows too dark." Mr. Harrow's job was straightforward: to patrol the clock tower, ensuring no one tampered with its mechanisms, and to walk the streets of Willoughby to keep an eye on the village while its inhabitants slept soundly. Though he had walked these paths for decades, he treated every shift with the same care as his first. One particularly stormy night, the wind howled through the narrow streets, and rain fell in sheets, rattling windows and bouncing off rooftops. The villagers had retreated indoors, huddling around fires and sipping warm drinks. The streets were empty, save for Mr. Harrow and his lantern. His boots squelched against the wet cobblestones as he made his way to the bakery. The bakery, owned by Mrs. Granger, was a place of comfort for the village, its scent of fresh bread and pastries always welcoming. Mr. Harrow knew the storm might have shaken the building's shutters, so he approached to check. As he neared the door, his lantern illuminated a shadowy figure curled against the entrance. His heart quickened for a moment, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a stray cat, drenched and trembling from the cold. Kneeling down, Mr. Harrow gently reached out. The cat's large green eyes blinked up at him, reflecting the light of the lantern. "Poor thing," he murmured. Taking off his thick scarf, he wrapped it around the shivering feline and carried it to the bakery's porch, where he fashioned a makeshift shelter using a crate and some dry cloth he found nearby. "There you go," he said softly, "safe and warm." As he was about to resume his patrol, Mr. Harrow noticed a faint, acrid smell in the air. At first, he dismissed it as the remnants of a burnt-out chimney. But as he moved further down the street, the smell grew stronger. A faint orange glow danced in the distance. His heart sank. Fire. Quickening his pace, he followed the glow to a small house near the village's edge. Smoke was billowing from the thatched roof, and flames licked at the wooden beams. Without hesitation, Mr. Harrow set his lantern down and rang the brass bell mounted at the house's front gate, a signal for emergencies. The sound echoed through the night, piercing the storm's roar. Villagers began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the bell's urgent clanging. "Fire!" Mr. Harrow shouted. "Bring water, quickly!" Buckets were filled at the village well and passed hand to hand in a practiced chain. Mr. Harrow, despite his age, joined in, throwing water onto the flames until the fire's ferocity lessened. Amid the chaos, he noticed a young girl crying nearby. "My doll," she sobbed. "It's still inside." Without a second thought, Mr. Harrow picked up his lantern and entered the smoldering house. The heat was oppressive, and the air was thick with smoke, but he moved swiftly, guided by the steady glow of his lantern. In the corner of a room, he spotted the doll, a small hand-stitched toy resting on a chair. He grabbed it and hurried back outside, coughing but triumphant. "Here you go, little one," he said, handing the doll to the girl. Her tear-streaked face lit up with gratitude. By dawn, the fire was extinguished, and the house was saved from complete destruction. The villagers gathered around Mr. Harrow, thanking him for his bravery and quick thinking. But Mr. Harrow, ever humble, shook his head. "It wasn't me," he said, lifting his lantern. "It was this little light that guided the way." The villagers smiled, understanding the deeper truth in his words. They decided to repair the house as a community, each family contributing what they could. As for Mr. Harrow, he returned to his nightly patrols, his lantern a symbol of hope and vigilance, and every time he passed the bakery, he'd glance at the porch where the stray cat now lived, adopted by Mrs. Granger and named Lantern in his honor. From that stormy night onward, the villagers of Willoughby slept even more soundly, knowing that in their midst was a watchman whose small acts of kindness and courage illuminated their darkest hours. The Guardian of the Night Garden. In the heart of the bustling city of Everspring, hidden behind tall iron gates and walls of ivy, there lay a sanctuary, the Night Garden. By day, it was a haven of vibrant flowers, sprawling lawns, and meticulously crafted fountains. Visitors came to admire its beauty, to breathe in the fragrance of roses and lilacs, and to escape the city's noise. By night, however, the garden transformed into a world of quiet wonder, with glowing lanterns casting soft light over its pathways and the moon painting its silvery glow over the tranquil ponds. And watching over this magical place was Mr. Darius, the night garden's solitary guardian. Darius had been the garden's security guard for nearly a decade, a man in his late 50s, with graying hair and kind, weathered eyes. He considered the garden his home. Every evening as twilight descended, he would lock the gates, ensuring the sanctuary's peace was preserved. Then he'd begin his rounds, walking the paths with a lantern in hand, his presence as much a part of the garden as the ancient oak trees that towered over it. One night, as the city's lights dimmed and the garden's lanterns flickered to life, Darius began his patrol. The evening air was cool, and the scent of jasmine hung heavily. He paused by the moonlit grove, a secluded area where white blossoms glowed under the moonlight. It was his favorite spot, a place where he often stopped to reflect. But tonight, something felt different. A faint rustling sound broke the stillness, coming from the far end of the grove. Darius's instincts sharpened. The garden had rules. No one was allowed after dark. Yet, as he approached the sound, he saw a group of teenagers crouched near the flower beds, their hands full of freshly plucked blossoms. Anger flared within him, but he quickly masked it with a calm demeanor. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his deep voice carrying authority. The teenagers froze, guilt written across their faces. One of them, a girl with wild curls, stammered, "We just wanted some flowers. They're so beautiful." Darius sighed, understanding their fascination, but unwilling to let their actions slide. "Do you know what these flowers are?" he asked, pointing to the crushed petals in their hands. The teenagers shook their heads. He knelt beside them, his lantern illuminating the delicate blooms. These are moonfire lilies. They only bloom at night and are rare beyond imagining. Each one takes years to grow. By plucking them, you've cut short their life and the joy they bring to everyone who visits this garden. The group looked down, shame evident in their expressions. The girl spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. We didn't know. Darius saw an opportunity. Instead of reprimanding them further, he said, "If you truly care about beauty, then you'll help protect it. Come with me." He led the teenagers through the garden, showing them its hidden wonders. The firefly pond, where tiny lights danced over the water. The whispering willows, whose leaves seemed to sing in the breeze. And the starlight arch, where climbing vines formed constellations with their blooms. As he walked, Darius explained the history of each plant, the care it required, and the role it played in the garden's ecosystem. The teenagers listened intently, their initial guilt transforming into awe. By the time the tour ended, the group had a newfound respect for the night garden. Darius handed them tools and gloves. "If you truly want to make up for tonight, you'll help me repair what you've damaged." They agreed without hesitation. The teenagers spent the rest of the night working alongside Darius, replanting what they could and clearing debris. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the garden looked as pristine as ever. Exhausted but fulfilled, the group thanked Darius for his patience and promised to return, not as intruders, but as volunteers. In the weeks that followed, the teenagers became regular visitors. They brought friends, spreading the message of respect and care for the garden. With their help, the night garden flourished like never before, its beauty reaching new heights. The moonfire lilies bloomed brighter, the ponds sparkled clearer, and the air seemed fresher, as if the garden itself acknowledged the efforts of its new caretakers. For Darius, it was a lesson in the power of teaching over punishment. He realized that protecting something precious didn't always mean keeping people away. Sometimes it meant inviting them in and showing them why it mattered. The night garden became not just a sanctuary for plants and flowers, but a place where people learned the value of preservation and stewardship. And so, under the watchful eyes of its gentle guardian, the night garden continued to thrive, a testament to the harmony between nature and humanity. Moral: protecting beauty and peace often involves teaching others their value, transforming ignorance into care and respect. The silent protector James was a quiet man of 24 with a sturdy build and a pair of keen eyes that missed nothing. Though young, he had an old soul and carried himself with the gravity of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. Freshly employed as the night security guard for the Grand Metropolitan Museum, James was determined to excel at his first job. The museum, a sprawling masterpiece of art and history, held priceless treasures, paintings, sculptures, and ancient relics that James had sworn to protect. Each night, as the city grew silent, James began his rounds. His job required him to walk the museum's vast halls, flashlight in hand, ensuring every door was locked and every artifact was safe. The museum, though bustling with visitors during the day, transformed into a serene and almost mystical place at night. The moonlight streaming through the grand windows illuminated the marble floors, casting long shadows that danced in the stillness. James loved the quiet, but he also felt the weight of his duty pressing on him. The museum's director, a stern man named Mr. Alder, had made it clear, "One mistake, and you're out. This place isn't just a building, it's a vault of human history. Treat it as such." One particularly quiet evening, James noticed something unusual. As he passed the Hall of Nature, where rare taxidermy animals and vibrant displays of the natural world were kept, he heard a faint fluttering sound. Stopping in his tracks, he scanned the room with his flashlight. The beam landed on a small bird trapped inside one of the exhibits, its delicate wings beating frantically against the glass. The bird must have entered through an open window earlier in the day, unnoticed by visitors. It was now desperate to escape. James's heart ached for the tiny creature. While freeing the bird wasn't technically part of his job, he couldn't bear to leave it. Carefully, he unlocked the exhibit and coaxed the bird out with gentle movements. It hesitated, then perched on his hand. "There you go," James whispered, walking it to an open window. As the bird flew into the night, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. It was a small act of kindness, but it mattered to him. The next few nights passed uneventfully, and James settled into his routine. He grew fond of the museum's treasures, often lingering to admire a particular painting or sculpture during his rounds. He felt a connection to the artifacts, as though he were a guardian of their stories. Then came a night that would test James's resolve. As he patrolled the East Wing, he noticed a faint but persistent sound, a soft scraping, barely audible over the hum of the building's ventilation system. His instincts kicked in, and he followed the noise to the Hall of Antiquities, where ancient statues and artifacts from around the world were displayed. Peering into the dimly lit hall, James spotted a figure near the far end. A man dressed in black, with a ski mask obscuring his face, was attempting to pry open a display case containing a rare, jewel-encrusted dagger. James's pulse quickened, but he didn't panic. He switched off his flashlight and silently approached, using the shadows to his advantage. When he was close enough, James spoke firmly, "Stop right there." The thief froze for a moment before bolting toward the exit. James pursued him, his footsteps echoing through the marble halls. Despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, James remained focused. The thief headed for the main entrance, but James knew the layout of the museum better than anyone. Taking a shortcut through the Hall of Portraits, he intercepted the man near the front doors. Using his training, James subdued the thief and restrained him until the police arrived. The officers commended James for his bravery and quick thinking. The museum's director, Mr. Alder, arrived shortly after and inspected the damaged display case. "You did well, James," he said gruffly. "Better than well. You protected something irreplaceable tonight." But James shook his head modestly. "It wasn't just me, sir. The museum's silence helps. It's almost like it whispers when something's wrong." As the police led the thief away, James noticed something remarkable. Perched on the windowsill above the museum's grand entrance was the same bird he had freed days earlier. Its small, dark eyes seemed to meet his, as if in silent acknowledgement. Then, with a flutter of wings, it disappeared into the night. From that day forward, James's reputation as a reliable and vigilant guard grew. The museum's staff treated him with newfound respect, and even Mr. Alder softened, occasionally sharing stories about the artifacts under their care. James continued his nightly rounds, ever watchful and attuned to the museum's subtle sounds. The Hall of Antiquities became his favorite place, not because of its treasures, but because it reminded him of the night he truly became the museum's silent protector. This story tells us, true guardianship is about vigilance and care, even when no one notices. It's the quiet acts of responsibility that create safety and trust.